Coming up, wow, the tank came on fast. The Brooklyn Nets get absolutely throttled by the Cavs, and we take a look at a very long remaining season ahead. All coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms, and let you know that the college football playoff is here, and you don't want to miss out on a moment of the action. College football playoffs are presented by Allstate and begin with 4 first-round games December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. And Doug, something we don't have to be worried about for the Brooklyn Nets is playoff basketball. My goodness. They trade Dennis Schroder. They take on the Cleveland Cavaliers. And it's almost as if you and I, not for, lack of wanting the team to be good, got exactly what we thought this roster was going to produce on a nightly basis going back to the start of the year.
Yeah, we said many times that if they traded Schroder, that was going to be really kickstarting the tank in earnest. He was been about their most important player this season. They don't have a functional replacement at all for what he does. Like even Cam Johnson, they could probably functionally replace a little bit with Jalen Wilson. It's not going to be 1-to-1 all the way there, but with Schroder, they just don't have anybody. And that was Schroder out, Cam Thomas out too. We just saw sort of what is probably a sign of things to come. These are weird and wild days in Nets world, right? Like this is kind of, from a want draft picks and want the draft picks to be higher in the lottery. This is kind of what you need to go through. And Monday night was a pretty sobering look at what the Nets season could be because, as you said, throttled. I mean, they got destroyed and they were actually winning by 7 to start the game. And then ultimately ended up just losing by 29. It was I think they were down 35 at one point. So I do think this is a sign of things to come. It is not a super exciting, short-term outlook for the team, but the idea here is by design, right? Like they traded Schroder on basically day one of the trade window because they were like, this is what we want. And it's going to be tough to watch here for the next few months.
And it's funny too, because on a high level, you talk about the way this team has played underneath Jordi Fernandez and the players and the veterans and Dennis Schroder being chief among them. But whether or not, I always think about this, whether or not in the back of the players' minds, they kind of knew, especially veteran guys, hey, this isn't about us, right? We're not going to be the core of this team going forward. Until the first trade happens, until it becomes official that they are going to dismantle this thing. We've heard them, Dorian Finney-Smith, talk about, hey, they're transparent. They told us up front about what this season could be. But until the first domino falls, I think if you're an athlete at this level, you still go, hey, we're doing, things are growing pretty good here. Like maybe it'll go the other way. Maybe they'll change their minds about what they want this to be. Schroder gets traded, and I think you do get a real fallout from that in the short term as far as how players look at it on a night in, night out basis. So I think Jordi Fernandez is going to have that task now over the next couple of games, convincing this roster with a couple of guys on it that aren't going to be here in another few days or weeks that, hey, no, we need to still do the process. We still need to work on our fundamentals and night in, night out, give the effort that is only going to be required for the other team you go play for eventually in playoff basketball. I think it's just an interesting spot to be in mentally if you're one of these players on the Nets right now.
It's going to be tough. There's no way around it. They have a limited talent on the team now. They have even the talent they do have doesn't really functionally fit together all that well. And again, this is by design. They traded their best player.
Yeah,
the very second they had a chance to do it, right? So it's again, this is not just the teams. This isn't the Pistons last year where they're thinking, oh, let's try to win, and they lose a gajillion games in a row, right? When they were clearly not trying to do that with Monty Williams. This is not that situation. This is different. Now, Jordi Fernandez for his side, he does not want this either. I'm sure he's got to just sort of thread the line here, try to get everyone to play hard basketball, be bought in, improve, get everyone better, while also knowing that he's just completely outgunned. He added to the game. He had an interesting quote. He said, we got punched in the face and we didn't have the togetherness, the fight to get back, to keep punching. It's extremely disappointing because whoever wears our jersey will fight more than that. And if not, you will not be part of this club. So I'm not sure who he was talking to exactly here. And I sympathize with him here because I'm sure he just doesn't want to coach this kind of club. On the other hand, I would say on one side of the ball, you have Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, right? And then on the net side, it's Ben Simmons, Keon Johnson, Cam Johnson, Nick Claxton, Dorian Finney-Smith. Like, what was the expectation here? And so I think this is going to be it'll be interesting to see as the season goes, sort of like how far that line of thinking, like what he says there, togetherness, toughness, who plays, whatnot, how far it sort of like extends into this, because there's just going to be a lot of losses here. There's just not really other ways around it. They don't have anywhere close to the talent of most teams they're going to end up playing in the NBA this year.
And the nice thing for an outside perspective on Fernandez is you already feel like over these first 25, we won't include this one, 25 games, that you understand what he is, what he's capable of, and what it's going to look like for the Nets going forward, right? So that feels like you've already checked that box. So now over the remainder of this season, you don't have to worry about saying, oh boy, is Jordi Fernandez the right voice in the locker room? No, it's just going to be a matter about talent and where this team is ultimately heading. But to your point, demanding something from a group of players, I mean, let's be clear. If you're going to trade who has been arguably your best player on the very first day that it's possible to do so, taking on the 23-4 Cleveland Cavaliers was the last team to go out and take on, right? Like, they got the Spurs coming up on the schedule. It's a 500 ball club. Toronto's near the bottom of the tankathon odds for draft. Like, you could have come out of this. I can name a dozen other teams. You could have said, oh my goodness, the Nets almost won that game, or even won that game coming out of trading Dennis Schroder just for the vibes of it. So there is kind of just the ultimate bad timing of trading Dennis Schroder and then taking on a team like the Cavs who've had an excellent season. But I do think it's the right dose of reality. If you're the Nets fan base, and I made some comments over on X and had people say, well, this is what you said you wanted. I said, yeah, I do want this. It doesn't make it any less exciting to, any more miserable, the prospect of watching games like these. So I think it probably sets the right tone for the rest of this season here as the Nets go forward.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between want something and understand the reality of the situation. Like there's two clearly like different things here, because everyone's like, oh, you want them to lose. It's like, well, I don't want them to lose. It's not fun watching a team get absolutely boat raced in, where you're watching and you have to go and you have to talk about them the next day for a half hour around, sort of like what happened in the game. No one wants that, but it's understanding the reality of the situation around where the Nets are. Like, that's more of what it is. It's like, it's a little thing called like logic, and the logic of the situation says, when you frame it under the Nets' current situation, this is the only path, because there's just no other way. The NBA doesn't work a bunch of different ways. Like, if the NBA worked like, oh, you can just go out and buy whatever players you want. Okay, well, they wouldn't do this. They're working under the framework of where they've placed themselves. Now, we can go back and have a moratorium or a referendum on what happened up until this point. Okay, we can do that. Like, there was other things that led to this point. For where they are now, or even where they were at the end of last season, this is just the reality of the situation. So I would really separate the idea behind want and just understand, because I think those are two different. I think there's just two different ideas, which I think sometimes people have trouble seeing.
Coming up here in a second, an emotional message to the Nets fan base. But plus, looking into this box score, how much is Dennis Schroder going to be missed going forward when you look at some of the performances in this Cleveland Cavs game? We'll go ahead and get into that coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you, my friends over at FanDuel, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers right now, you can get $5 or bet $5. You can get 150 in bonus bets in you win. A bunch of interesting stuff happening here over on FanDuel. You get the Thunder -5 here in the NBA Cup Finals. Don't mind that. Be an interesting one. Again, we're always rooting for the Bucks to lose with that pick coming through. Nets 5.5 point underdogs going into Toronto over there on Thursday. That one's interesting too, because it's a little hard to judge where the Nets were. They were only -10 or +10.5 against the Cavs. And that one came in pretty easily on the Cavs side. Also, you can look at a little future. Nets under 22.5 wins right now for the rest of the season. Yikes. Do the math on that one. They already have 10. So you can kind of do the math on where everyone sees the rest of this season going. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, on the NBA, all in one place. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with 150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 real money bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, obviously coming out of the 130-101 loss for the Brooklyn Nets at the hands of the Cleveland Cavaliers, also at home. There's just a double and triple down on the unfortunate nature of coming out of this Dennis Schroder trade. Also a home game. Wouldn't have hated it if you did it on the road. But to the fan base, before we talk about some of the individual performances in this and the problems that clearly we knew were coming once Schroder was moved, I will just say, I realized in talking over on YouTube in the comments, talking over on X with everybody, I get it to the fan base because sometimes I feel like I'm trying to explain something to a fan. Hey, this is why it makes sense. We just talk about, right? The tank, it's logical. You don't have to like it to understand it. The other side of it is, I think a lot of the fans do get it. And it's still depressing. You mentioned about a referendum on what was, right? But remember how they totally screwed up the superstar era? So we didn't have deep playoff runs and championship opportunities. And now they're talking about stripping this thing apart and making it, a project for 2 to 3 years from now where we'll all be super excited. We have these veterans and they're not going to win a championship, but they're going to play some good basketball. Like I got so much of that sense coming out of what was 10-15. And the funny thing about it was, because you think about the high level, that's a 33 game win clip right there on the year. So we knew this team was still not going to be good enough, most likely, to really make any dent, even from a being in the playoff situation, maybe being in the play-in. But it still is that emotional pull when you are around a team long enough where, regardless of what expectation was, they've come up short on it, right? By and large, they come up short on whatever expectations are for that year. And that's what I think really grinds down on the fan base year over year. And then you get to this point, and it's just hard. It's a hard pill to swallow when the over-under has been lowered and you only have maybe 9 more wins to watch on the season.
It's terrible. It's a terrible system. We've talked about this many times. Like, sports should not work this way. There should never be incentives around losing. They've screwed up. The NBA screwed up. Like the NBA, the NFL, the NFL doesn't handle this a little better. But these teams screwed up when they originally were making the rule, or when the leagues were originally making the rules. I get why. Every rule starts on someone's desk is like not a bad idea. And then you get a few years away and it's like, whoop, we screwed that up. So everything usually starts in a good place. And then everyone gets their hands on it and, molds it to the thing they want it to be. And then you're going to angle shoot it and you're going to do all these other things that are just going to happen. So it's the league's fault for setting this up this way. It's not, and I understand why the fans are frustrated about it for sure. Like, again, no one wants to sign up to use their time, of which we only have a limited supply, and their money, which you can have a slightly less limited supply depending on how you go about it. But like, to use your time and money on this thing that like is bad and is bad on purpose. Is a very tough sell. I'm with you on that one. It sucks. Like I don't want to watch them just get crushed and not be able to do anything in the half court and all this stuff. But the league set it up this way, and the Nets are just like doing the best version of this to like have it be so that 2 or 3 years from now they have a viable team. Is it a guarantee? No, but I'll tell you what is a guarantee. What would have been a guarantee is the version that they had after last year, doubling down and using the rest of their assets to maybe go after one player for like a 3-year run. That might have been okay. And then what would have happened after that is like 10 years of pain, 10 years of absolute pain with no dream of getting another pick on the other side of it. Like, because they would have unloaded those. So it's like, I mean, which one do you want? This is a very difficult thing. Again, I'm put it all on the blame of the NBA. Go send a letter to the NBA and say, change the rules. That's where we are. It's not within the construct of where the rules are. The Nets are doing the right thing. It's unassailable. It's unassailable. They're doing the correct thing. The only way to do this is this way. And if you're mad about it, go tell the league to change the rules. That's really kind of where we are.
No, and it's brutal from that standpoint all the way around. Just a really fun game on a Monday night for Brooklyn Nets and for the fan base. But inside the game, so no Dennis Schroder, and we speculated on this. Ben Simmons' minutes spiked right back up. Played 31 minutes, 4-7. That's 7 shot attempts, Doug. I know perks your ears up there. Also got to the line 2 times. But in the end, his 10, 8, and 4 line does not make up for losing Dennis Schroder. Keon Johnson, who we like, but in 24 minutes and goes 2 of 8 and only gives you 5 points, and maybe most critically only gives you 2 assists, right? Not good enough. Those 2 players combined for 15 points. Dennis Schroder averaged almost 19 a game. So, the replacement of, and we didn't expect her to be able to do that, but you see it in the court, you see it in the product, you see it in the way it looks on the offensive end. But it's just that such a gut punch reality check of you're not going to replace that. And it's also amplified by the fact that you still don't have Cam Thomas out there on the floor. So from a scoring perspective, you knew the second you took away Dennis Schroder, it was going to hurt the bottom line on putting up points. And it also was going to hurt every other player and their functionality on the offensive end, outside maybe of, thank goodness, high trade value, Cam Johnson, who still put up over 20 points and actually took a big step up in the assist category with 5 of his own. But these box scores are going to look strikingly similar to what you see here in the short term for the Brooklyn Nets because they just don't have the functional pieces to work together right now.
Yeah, I mean, they lost by 29 and they shot 41% from 3. That's
almost hard to do.
Very hard to do. I mean, they didn't take the same volume as the Cavs. They're outshot by 13 overall. So that's kind of like, where part of this ends up happening. But overall, they shot decently and still got throttled. The problem here, and we knew this was Schroder, and we saw it play out last night. They just can't really run the same half-court offense. Like, Schroder is a pick-and-roll ball handler. I mean, that's actually why Golden State kind of specifically got him to run pick-and-roll sort of off the bench in like a slightly different system. That he's a pick-and-roll ball handler in a league where you really need to run pick-and-roll. Like, you just have to run, whether it's 1-5 pick-and-roll, which he's really good at, or just other versions of it. They've kind of done all versions of it this year. Like, the 1-3 stuff with just like getting one of the wings as a screener and then being able to either, they don't really roll as much as kind of like pop out to shoot, or this running this motion offense. It's bred on being able to have like one guy, at least one guy who can press the defense and get himself to the rim willingly. And Schroder would do that. There's no one else right now on the team that can or wants to do that, right? Like, so, and this is kind of like basketball 101. If you don't have a guy that can do that stuff, and some teams don't have a point guard that do it, but they have wings that can do it. Like they have, Tatum runs this all the time. Like, they just have other guys that can run it, and the Nets kind of don't have anyone. And again, from a basketball 101 standpoint, you just have to be able to do this to start to be able to tax defenses enough to find open shots, to get better shots, to get to the rim, to have the threat of a lob, like all these things that it sort of unlocks on the decision tree. And they just don't have it. Simmons has one thing he wants to do. He wants to dribble the ball, turn his back, and just hand the ball off to someone else so they can shoot a 3. Like, he doesn't run that kind of offense. And they don't have, and honestly, even Cam Thomas doesn't really run this offense, but at least he can score. Right. And so
that's the difference, is that ability. What you lost in Dennis Schroder was someone who wanted to attack at the basket, and Cam Thomas also wants to do that. But once you get into it, it exposes so much about it. As much as we like even Cam Johnson or any of these players, Jalen Wilson, when he comes in off the bench, it gets exposed that, oh, right, they're not going to pick up their dribble consistently and take on their defender 1v1 and go at the basket and force defenses to shift, collapse, switch up assignments, and create new opportunities. That's not a part of their game, and it doesn't need to be, unless you all of a sudden break down the functionality of your point guard role because the other guy you have after Schroder is someone that historically is allergic to driving the basket, putting pressure on the defense, and creating some of those looks. All the ball handling and passing in the world isn't going to change the fact that it allows defenses to stay at home. So nothing new, but also depressing. Coming up here in a second, let's go ahead and give ourselves a bright spot and a name that at least quietly has been floated around some of these trade discussions. One, Day'Ron Sharpe off the bench. We'll do that to close things out in just one moment.
All right, with Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on an uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. When you're done with that, visit our friends over at Rocket Money. Look, you got those subscriptions out there you're paying for. Sometimes you're paying for twice. I've been down this road many times. Don't even get me started on some of the, Adam knows this, some of the streaming services that I found out years later. 2, 3 subscriptions to the same one. What's happening in my family? It just completely out of hand. This is what Rocket Money helps you solve. It tracks them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app. Helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, helps you lower those bills so you can grow that savings, brings everything together in one place. Subscriptions, your spending habits, even the goals you want to hit this year. Over 500 million users, wait for this number, has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions. Part of that was mine, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. rocketmoney.com/locked-on.
All right, as we tie a pretty little bow on our Locked On Nets episode, talking about not only the 130-101 loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers, but also the impact of losing Dennis Schroder. And frankly, I mean, let's not, bury the lead here as we've talked about over the last several weeks. Let's remember that Cam Johnson's probably getting traded here soon, that Dorian Finney-Smith is probably getting traded here soon too. So if you think that this game against the Cleveland Cavaliers was rough to watch, just wait. Just you wait until they really strip this thing apart, and then we'll see what some of these games look like. But inside of this, only one man was bold enough, only one man strong enough to give you a positive plus-minus performance, and that was one Day'Ron Sharpe. 20 minutes of action. He goes ahead and pours in 15 points, one of three three-point attempts, 5 of 10 from the field overall, 4 of 4 at the line, gave you 7 rebounds as well, along with 3 steals. I mean, Day'Ron Sharpe, this is, man, it's so hard to look at a game like this and say, like, here's just a bright spot. But for a guy that was getting buried down the stretch of last season on the bench and then has the injury coming into this year, this is a really good sign for him, just overall point stop, getting in and playing some minutes. What it ends up meaning going forward is kind of a TBD, because his name, with his rebounding skills alone, does get floated as kind of like a pot sweetener in some of these deals if the Nets want to grab a better asset from another team.
Yeah, he's like a functional backup big who can rebound, who can do at least one NBA thing really well, which is rebound.
That's right.
Right. And so if you're a team that needs a backup 5 and you're struggling on the boards, like, he is a guy that you should come calling about. Right. I think that, like, that's pretty clear. And we always been a little confused about where the Nets stood with him. It's been a bummer that he's been hurt, here to start the season. So it's sometimes a little tough to sort of like get a true sense of where they want to go. I will say, good sign for him that he was basically part of like the first rotation, although they did essentially a hockey change last night in the first quarter where they just brought out all the starters, and it was like Milton, Watford, Clowney, and Day'Ron, and then Jalen Wilson was already in there. But like, you don't usually see full lineup changes like that, but the Nets did it last night. So I guess it's a good sign, although I guess it's like a little weird because it's just not usually how it happens. I'm excited to see more of him. The Nets are going to have to make a decision on him at the end of the year, right? If like he ends up staying over the course of this year. But if I get to the trade deadline and there's a team out there who either like lost the center, and I could probably just look at this real quick to see like where the market would be. But like, if the team needs a backup 5, it's funny because like the Knicks, actually, he'd be pretty good on the Knicks. Like, it's just like a guy who can get out there.
Hey, Knicks, you guys want to make a deal? Look, we're totally legit about it.
No, like a team like that, I could see him fitting on. I'm not want to run through this whole list right here, but like, he for sure, if you can do certain NBA things really well, like, you'll have a role. I don't think he's probably ever a high quality starting center, but he for sure can fit a need off the bench. It is a bummer, like not having him play a ton with Schroder this year is a bummer, because Schroeder's like the kind of guy that can unlock dudes like this, and then that's don't really have anyone, even though he had a good game last night.
And the funny thing is, too, it's like it was never the way the roster was constructed. And Nicholas Claxton, the superstar era of the team, didn't look like an opportunity for Day'Ron either. I mean, Day'Ron's career has followed the same path as Cam Thomas, just in terms of the way seemingly the team thought about him after drafting him. Like, we know we took you, but also we're not so sure what we're going to do with you. And we'll see in 3 years. And obviously he's not the caliber to this point that Cam Thomas has exploded to. But I find it very interesting when you think about trade deadline and other teams looking at him. Sometimes what you have to do is look at the other rosters. Don't look at it through what has he been able to do as a Brooklyn Net. Think about what he could be capable of if he joined Team X with elite player Y, who's going to unlock him for those minutes, or who has the right. You talk about Dennis Schroder being the starting point guard for the Nets because they don't even have anybody else functional off the bench really at this point. Well, there's functional backup point guards in the league that would pair nicely with a Day'Ron Sharpe off the bench as well, right? So he may be in that spot to strengthen a bench unit for another team. I just find that really interesting to watch as this continues on. Other notable, as Doug mentioned at the top of the show, I think to close things out, at least for me personally, When we talk about playing Toronto next, they're going to have them 2 times over the next 9 games. Toronto is 7-20. They've lost now 5 in a row. They're 3-7 in their last 10. They have their own injuries going on. It's going to be hard to get over some of these teams, but I outlined most recently in the newsletter about how you can surge up this board pretty quickly in short order if you're the Brooklyn Nets. And unlike other times in the season or any other season, I am circling key dates, including 2 matchups against Toronto, and saying, for the love of God, whatever it takes to lose those games, you kind of need to do it, because that's the only way you can start to claw your way back sooner than later and get up those tankathon odds. They are 10-win team. Toronto's 7 wins, and that's what you need to do. Close a 2 to 3 game gap here as quickly as humanly possible, because every team ahead of you right now, every team has lost and is on a losing streak of at least 2 games, all the way up to 5 and 6 when it comes to a team like Portland, who's 2 spots ahead of you as well.
Yeah, I mean, these are going to be like, I don't know, important games. I don't.
I hate it's so messed up, right? It's so insane to like try to. It is. These are. How about this for a take? These are the most important games of the Brooklyn Nets franchise, and it's for the only reason of needing to lose them relative to anything else they've done in the last 5 to 6 years.
And it's to have like the same relative odds, like 1 through 3. I get that they smoothed out the odds, and that was probably smart. It didn't get all the way there, but just because the teams are still going to, especially in a draft class like this, that is, pretty deep, right? Like Flag and Harper alone seem, and if you want to throw Ace in there, he slipped a little bit, but those 2 guys alone are guys you'd start tanking for, right? So and you're like, oh, if we can get kind of guarantee we're in the top 3 or 5, like we're just going to have a guy, right, that we can come out of the draft with. So, that's where these games get pretty important. So I want them to win. We're always just going to root for wins in the moment. I don't know if that's what you're asking, but
I've gone through this with the New York Giants. I know that they need to lose as many games as possible and hold on to a number 1 overall pick. They're second right now. That's what they need to do. But when it gets kicked off on Sunday, if they put together a few good plays, you go, well, I wouldn't hate if they scored on this drive, right? I mean, if the Nets come out on any given night and they look good, I get behind the idea of them winning that game, because it's just more fun, first of all, to watch those games, and because you see guys making the effort. You see guys responding to Jordy Fernandez's message, right? So there is a yin and yang to this, but in the end, we will, over the next 5, 7, 10 games, get a real sense of how achievable having those top 4 odds are going to be for the Brooklyn Nets. I do think we'll understand that in short order as they start to strip this team away. It's like you can't accidentally walk into wins the way you did at the beginning of the year. It kind of becomes critical that if you're down 20, don't even think about trying to come back, right? The games like that are going to be the ones that you probably try to hang your hat on losses, which is brutal, though. And it's never the way that you or I like to watch a team or watch sports in general. But that is what the assignment is for the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, 56 games left in the season. It's a lot of games. They've only played 26 games. They've only played 26 games. That's not there's a lot of season to go. Right. I think they'll have some ups. I do think they'll have some ups and downs. I do not think they're going to press way over 20 wins at this point, but I just think that's hard to see. Again, the thing we saw most recently is sometimes the thing we make our decisions on, and things can
10
change.
and 42. What's the problem? What's the problem over the back half of the season?
That seems like a lot, but it's also one of these things. But is that right? No, that's not 10 and 42.
What did I say? Yeah, 52 games left.
No, it's 10 and 46. There's 56 games left.
No, I'm fine. Let's just move on. Hold on. Let me. 10 and 46. Yeah, that's right.
It's even worse. Anyway, on that high note, we're gonna get out of here. Make sure you subscribe to Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe over on YouTube as well. Locked On Nets.
Adulthood for many of these Brooklyn Nets is like looking both ways before crossing the street and then getting hit by a plane, and that is from Emily Francos.
One of the all-time great posts. We're back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah.